What stops us doing the things that we want to do? Things that we're curious about and we want to pursue. Things we know are good for us, but we maybe don't do them. I think it's a big complex soup of lots of different things that stop us. I think sometimes it's the timing, different chapters in our life, different seasons of our life. We can have more inspiration to do certain things and be able to build patterns and routines as well as feeling often worthy of doing those things. I want to talk a wee bit today about this new creative project, the reasons I've decided to start a new podcast and move away from my previous podcast, and the things I want to explore on this new podcast, the exciting new ideas that I have and the people I want to talk to. And yes, also probably share why I've maybe not done it for so long. I think it is the timing of things that it's a perfect time sometimes to do things, but also I think it for me has been a bit of a kind of self confidence and self esteem situation. And I've only in the last couple of years really defined both of those things differently. I think I see now self confidence as something that is wrapped up in our performance of something and often related to how much we practice. So, for example, if you think about an athlete who continually practices their specific sport, they do the training, they show up every day, or and they have consistency. Often that then prepares them and encourages or nurtures a certain amount of confidence for whatever they're preparing for. Similarly, if you're if you feel, I guess confidence, if you feel confident in something, it is often matched with evidence that you have skills in that specific area. Um, and this is why sometimes, let's use the athlete as an example, when they become injured, or they retire, their confidence kind of dwindles because they're not able to practice anymore. And they recognize that they have been covering up a self esteem issue. So, moving on to what self esteem is also often always related to how we view ourselves and our sense of worth, how much value we place on ourselves, our belief within ourselves, our kind of internal relationship to ourselves, kind of conditioned by lots of different things, our childhood, our relationship with people around us, our relationship with ourselves during that time. Um, and then it kind of layers and is impacted by different things in our life, but not as dramatically as confidence and performance. So that's why we can have someone that has got high confidence and low self worth or low self esteem. Um, and it probably works the other way where someone has high self regard, self esteem, but knows that they don't feel confident in specific areas because they've not had the exposure um, or they've not had the practice time. So I think I connect this back to, and I'll explore a wee bit more about self esteem and self worth, but know that that's the often the more complex thing to unpack and understand and also improve, maybe, um, because it's often a complex soup of different things that create our inner internal dialogue with yourself, our relationship with yourself, and it's often more complex things that move that relationship. Probably easier to move it down than it is to move it up because of the nature of our internal world often. But confidence often has a direct relationship with our skill level, our experience, and our performance in some things. That's why often our confidence can go down if we perform not as we expect, that type of thing. So, how this relates to what I wanted to share today is that I was out of practice. I took time off of doing the podcast when I started training to become a counselor, and also the pandemic was a kind of an exciting time where I didn't think too much about my capabilities. Um, it was almost like lots of creativity was going about in the air and the kind of zeitgeist. And so I was kind of encouraged to create a podcast then. I had listened to podcasts for years and had always really had the seeds planted of creating my own eventually. And then I listened to a few Scottish podcasts, and it was the first time I ever had Scottish podcasts to listen to. It was so exciting because I'd spent so many years listening to kind of Americanized views on the world, although it was kind of in some ways relatable, especially when I was running and listened to kind of nutrition podcasts and training podcasts. It still wasn't fully relatable to, yeah, home. So it was really exciting at the time to see podcasts starting from Scotland. And that was another kind of motivator and encourager for me to start my own, like, other people, similar to that idea of role models. If we see people like us doing that thing, then it encourages us often more to do that or try it. And as time went on, and as the space between me doing a podcast and not doing it grew, my confidence fell because I hadn't had the practice, but also this sense of not feeling good enough rose. So this feeling of, actually, do I have the self-worth and self-belief to do that creative thing? And that was never something I'd thought about before because I was just in the midst of doing it. I had the momentum to feel excited about meeting new people and talking about ideas. I was in that flow. You know, when creative writers talk about creative block, writer's block, that often happens when someone feels stuck and they're not in the flow momentum of doing something. And that's a point where we sometimes judge ourselves, question our ability, question what we're doing, and where sometimes we can spiral into not feeling like we're doing the right thing, or it creates space between us and doing the thing. So that's why sometimes we can get stuck in that cycle. Whereas creative flow is often filled with momentum and doing, and there's not a lot of time, or from my experience, there's not a lot of time to doubt or question or judge. So I was in that process. Even when I was releasing the podcast, I wasn't fearing other people's judgment because I was so excited about the experience itself. I wasn't even really thinking about if anyone listened to it. Um, I probably had that unconsciously there, but a part of me was really excited to meet the person and connect and share stories. And it was such an exciting time. So, like I mentioned, when I stopped, the confidence to do it lessened, as well as just the energy, the time that I was wanting to go back and maybe start it. I just didn't have the energy because if anyone is listening and has become a counselor, they'll know the exhausting process that is physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. It requires all of you, like many pursuits. But I think, yeah, my experience of becoming a therapist required so much of me that it didn't leave a lot left to become. I was going to say to become, but it's more to do the podcast. So yeah, time passed, months passed, and I had all these ideas still bubbling. And I had other ways to really share them, whether that was in my essays and in my class, and then I was also connecting with clients. So I often see communication and conversations as creative. So I had an outlet to still explore ideas. It was just not being recorded. And then I started to feel a wee bit mm, like there's that same feeling that I was talking about during the pandemic of seeing lots of people like me. I began to see less people like me in the space of doing podcasts. Like it does feel like there's been a massive ramp up in how many podcasts there is, but there's not a lot of women who continually do it, especially alone. And I understand why that is. My experience might be different to anyone else's, but for me, I had to push through a lot of doubt and fear and not feeling worthy of being heard. I think that's a big point that sometimes, well, if we just look at the natural statistics around podcasts, it's predominantly a kind of male dominated space. That's not to say there's not tons of women doing it together, but I do think that there is less women and also less women who are doing podcasts solely by themselves. And I think there's something in our conditioning in society that kind of shares, especially historically, that women can't take up enough space. We don't have value in our opinions. Our worth doesn't come from our opinions. It comes from caring, responsibilities, all that kind of stuff that I have no kind of I don't identify with. Still somehow is woven into the fabric of my self-belief, and can creep in when I'm thinking about starting something up again. So, long explanation, but I've, I guess, wanted to share that because I'm now in a space where I've got that kind of excitement back to do it, and I'm not in the space of judging myself or worrying about how it will be perceived, because we can only be ourselves, right? And people will filter us through their own perceptions. So we only have control of how much we are ourselves, and that's limited to yeah, our processing, understanding, and the work that we've done on ourselves. But I think I'm in a kind of comfortable place within myself that ebbs and flows with the seasons, predominantly winter, darker nights, that can challenge me and has done for years. But I'm now, I think I'm in a more positive space after the January experience. We're kind of midway through January or at the end of January now, and the 23rd. Yeah, I've heard a lot of people say it feels like the longest January in the world, but I feel like I'm beginning to feel like the spring is at the end of the tunnel, and that's like planting seeds for creativity and flourishing for the summer. And I feel kind of that hope's coming back. So I wanted to start a podcast where I can really explore the ideas around therapy and things that are therapeutic in that kind of broad spectrum, and think about mental and physical well-being. Think about some of the challenges that we currently still experience. Think about the masses and masses of information out there that make it sound easy to feel and experience peak health without considering all of the inequality that still currently exists. This kind of constant bombardment with all these things we should be doing to feel and experience health. I really want to explore that further, and I'm excited to explore that further. Um, I want to do it with other therapists and like-minded people, not just therapists, but I do want to connect with therapists too, because I feel like there's such a beautiful community in Scotland. And yet there's still this kind of untapped connection there. I'm sure that if there's any Scottish therapists listening, that you've had the odd message here and there from amazing therapists supporting your work or celebrating what you're sharing. And I think there is an opportunity there for more connection and more communication. I feel that because I've kind of had touch points with lots of different people that I would love to get to know more and connect with more and hear their thoughts on things. So I'm thinking about doing a podcast where it's got one main theme, but then there's some questions I ask consistently, like what's your approach to therapy? What's your kind of non-negotiable ways that you look after yourself throughout the year? Because that might fluctuate throughout the year, or throughout the day. I mean, it changes for all of us often. Um, so yeah, having a bit of I'm hesitant to say structure because I don't really work well with creative structures. I work well with like routines and stuff in my day for running and that type of thing, counseling clients, all that stuff, calendaring my day. But I don't think I work well too much with creative structure, times and stuff. That's not great for my brain. So, but I do want to have a few consistent questions I ask to hear the variety of answers. Um, but at the same time explore different themes. So I'm going to end in a couple of minutes, but I just wanted to share a couple more things because I want to explore running too. I've been running for a big part of my life now, and over the last few years, really developed a kind of balanced relationship with running that I never had before. And I really want to kind of explore that it's our relationship to the thing. I've shared that in the past, but this is a new podcast, so maybe share it again. That it's not the thing itself, it's not the alcohol or the running or the food or whatever the behavior is. It's not that thing that's the issue. Often it's our relationship to that, our history with it. So, and what it's giving us, and how we might be meeting needs from that thing that we could get elsewhere that would satisfy that kind of need in a more fulfilling way. So I want to talk a wee bit about how I've got to that place with running, and now I'm running my first ultra for my 30th birthday. And I just explore that in a deeper way that you can, or I have changed. I don't believe in saying you can do this, because that's filtering through my experience and my perceptions, ideas, all that kind of stuff. But I just want to share my experience of all sorts of things, and often more the learnings I've had from other people that I've just kind of absorbed and made sense of in my own way. So there's, yeah, so many things. I'm kind of exploring names of the podcast too. So I'm thinking, I shared this in the last We Stories podcast, but I'm I'm also thinking, should I just cut off that YouTube and start again? But anyway, yes, I shared in the last episode of that what could I call the podcast before I thought of doing another one, and I shared it something to do with umbrella term, because I believe, and I know from myself and my experience now, that everything feels connected, and everything, I start off by saying one thing, but it feels like it naturally falls into something else. So that idea of it all coming under one umbrella, um, I'm still working on that because it doesn't feel like it fully fits yet. Um, yeah, what kind of list do I have here? Yeah, I want to talk about the challenges around freelance work and how there's a lot of similarities in different freelance industries, and that we could learn from each other. That sense of like coming together and building community and sharing challenges and supporting each other and signposting clients to each other and learning from that, like pockets of, like, yeah, it's like a huge bank of wisdom. So I want to talk a bit about that. A couple of more things I'll share because I don't want to share so much here. Relationship with our bodies and self-care for therapists, women, hormones, um, diet cults. Yeah, that's something I'm really excited about sharing and exploring more. Um, Music, yeah, all sorts of things. And I've got a wee list of people that I want to speak to. Yeah. Oh, I've got a quote here as well that I'll share randomly because I take so much notes on my phone. I've got like over 1,000 notes in here with tons of stuff. I always just write things down if I have an idea, especially when I'm running. I have so many ideas just popping up. So I've copied a quote here. Art should comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. Gosh. Art should comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. And I love that idea that art can shake up existing systems of equality and oppression, whilst at the same time comforting the people that are directly impacted by these inequalities. Whew, I forgot that that was there. I'm going to end there just with a welcome to this new podcast. Thank you for listening. And if you've listened and you want to talk a wee bit more about any of the things I've shared or anything else, like I said, it's going to be a really wide ranging podcast. I'm not going to commit to any frequency or, yeah, anything like that at the moment, because life happens, things get in the way. I know there's this kind of optimal, do it weekly, do it regularly. My aim is to connect, whether that's connecting with the audience that listen, connect with the people I do it with, connect more with myself. Um, so I don't feel like that, although like frequency can nurture that connection, I also don't want to put pressure on myself and anyone else. So yeah, upload as frequently as possible. But I'm really excited to share this and start this new chapter. And yeah, I'll speak to you soon. Take care.